is ironic that people believe and preclude the notion of there ever being a flood with 80% of the Earth's crust as sedimentary rock laid down by water, and these fossil graveyards where thousands of fossils are intertwined. It's just two ways to look at the evidence, but in the last days will come scoffers, and they will not believe in the flood. Just so happens we're here.
Yeah. Hey everyone. So today is a super exciting topic that we're bringing to you. We are talking about fossils and does science prove that fossils are old?
Yeah, who doesn't like fossils, right?
I know they're super cool.
Everyone loves growing up seeing fossils of dinosaurs, and it just gave us the imagination to run wild with. And it's a fun topic. So, how are they made? Why do we have fossils, anyways? So, there's two different ways of looking at how fossils are made. What has to happen is there has to be a covering up of the animal that dies. It cannot have oxygen, or it will oxidize and break down the body, and you won't be able to make a fossil. And there has to be water to take away the minerals. So the current theory for evolutionists is the animal dies, and usually in an ocean or next to a body of water, and it goes to the bottom and is covered up by sediment because it has to be covered rapidly, and so it doesn't have oxygen. And then the water will pull the minerals and basically fossilize whatever animal gets there. But the main point is that you have to have rapid burial and you have to have no oxygen. I don't know. We go to the lake every once in a while and you see fish. Fish die. What do? Float.
Yeah.
Animals float. They don't sink to the bottom. And, there's crustaceans and other animals that will go down there, and especially bottom feeders that go eat everything. Things don't just, go to the bottom of the ocean or a lake or a body of water and get covered up. There has to be somewhat of a cataclysmic event for those things to happen, sort of like a flood. And how do we find most fossils? Most fossils are in fossil graveyards. Wherever it is in the world they find them, there's, thousands of fossils intertwined doing daily functions. You'll see them, we have fossils of animals giving birth. We have fossils of animals eating other animals, fish swallowing other animals, or a bunch of random things, fighting with one another. So it had to be an instantaneous event. We don't see fossils being formed today. We don't find a bunch of modern day fossils, do we?
Right.
Why don't we see fossils being formed all the time today?
Exactly what I was going to ask. Why not? What?
Because it usually has to be a cataclysmic event. I know we're not digging at the bottom of the ocean, but we do have cameras at the bottom of the ocean, and you see crustaceans going and eating everything. Things don't just sink to the bottom and get covered over. And it is kind of funny fact that we have 80% of the Earth's crust is sedimentary rock. Signs of a flood. If I was going to be the judge. So very interesting.
Definitely. And so, dinosaurs obviously are really cool. When we're growing up, we're taught, we go, brush up off the fake dinosaur fossils and learn all about that. But what about everything else? Like not even just animals, but, items as well. And modern day fossils that we found.
Yeah, just take a long time to make a fossil.
Right.
Can't remember the place in England, but we found there's a waterfall there that you can put items under and it will demineralize and it keeps the oxygen away from these items. And you can make fossils in a few months. Crazy, they have a fossil teddy bear that's kind of funny. They found the caves and things they get covered up, and you can make fossils quickly. They do not have to take millions of years to form. And one of the really cool items that I believe is Mary Schweitzer, I think it was in the early 2000s, found, and you can read in scientific journals, she found T-Rex bones in Montana, and these T-Rex bones are supposed to be tens of millions of years old, and she finds soft tissue, so collagen, proteins, blood vessels, spongy connective tissue that still has life to it. And it was found accidentally because she accidentally messed up and cut this T-Rex fossil apart.
Wow.
And it's in Montana. It's a environment that's very treacherous. It's not preserved in ice.
Right.
Millions of years old. We have science, and we've done scientific studies, observable, testable, demonstratable, that show the degradation process and how long it takes for things to be eradicated. And you shouldn't have collagen and other proteins that are surviving or DNA fragments for more than, 50,000 years. And this is stretching science to what we know, but not tens to the hundreds of millions of years.
Right.
But that just goes to show you scientists will do whatever they can and change their theories because they have to protect their all and holy millions of years. These animals are millions of years old because if there's not that time there, that magic wand of time, evolution can't, doesn't have a chance to be true. So
Right.
they protect that at all costs. Once again, we have the end result, which we must protect. It doesn't matter what the science. We'll change our scientific beliefs based on what our end result is.
Definitely. And, a lot of scientists, we've seen this before when they're talking or when they notice that they have discovered the soft tissue and things like that, their defense is that it was frozen, right? And like you said, this fossil of the T-Rex was not frozen. It was in Montana.
And they're finding this in all sorts of fossils.
Right.
And what did they do? Immediately they came out and they said, "Oh, it's contamination. Contamination. It's always contamination." Our our results are never contaminated, but all the younger theories and scientific things we find it's all contamination. The problem is they said it was bacterial contamination. The problem is bacteria don't have collagen, so that was the easy one to prove. But yeah, in DNA fragments, and they found this in all sorts of fossils now. They're supposed to
Wow.
be tens of millions of years old. So that alone should prove that these fossils were around much, much earlier.
So
than they
let's
say.
talk about the different layers when fossils are laid down. Obviously it needs to be an instant, right?
Well, for fossils to form, so they have a geologic column that they've taught you. You have Cambrian explosion when the first fossils were laid down. And by the way, they just exploded out of nowhere. There's nothing below them. And, bacteria, all the creatures that are fully formed, fully functioning. And then you have a bunch of layers over them, which they've given names to. You don't find the geologic column anywhere in the world. They piece together different parts of the world and go, "Oh, this was here, this was here." And we'll have index fossils. Basically, they don't radiometric date different fossils to tell you what the layer of the earth is. They will know what the age is based on what fossils there. So, if an index fossil, they go, "Okay, we know that's 100 years old. We know this one's here." So, it's circular reasoning how they use this.
Thank you. That's a good way to put it because, in our last episode, we were talking about radiometric dating and how they're dating rocks and telling us the age of the earth, yet they're not.
But you can actually carbon 14 date fossils, and they're finding plenty of fossils that are supposed to be millions of years old that still have C14, showing that they had to be less than 50,000 years old. They're not that old. And you can do the same with diamonds, coal beds, and many other things to show that they're not that old. And that's not a perfect science either, anyways. But the fact that it's still there shows that it could not be more than 1,000 years old.
Right. Which means humans were around the time of dinosaurs, right? And then let's talk into, kind of playing off of our discussion of evolution last episode, talking about evolution of us coming from apes and the fossils that prove that.
Well, we have the main one. That's Australopithecus. I can't remember the second word. There's multiple of those, but Lucy is the main one. Everyone's heard of Lucy, or most people have.
I hadn't. Don't feel bad if you haven't.
But, they really haven't found, they find apes and they find humans or Neanderthals, just another type of human, another area of humans. They weren't any different from us. They're more studies that are done. They're finding that these Neanderthals are almost the same. They were just another subsect or area where humans live, different humans that maybe are a little bigger. But Lucy was one that was, the all holy missing link they found. They took huge swath of land. I use like 40 square meters and over 160 cubic feet of dirt. It was a ton, literally, of dirt they used, but they found over 40 bones, like 1% of bones. They found one finger bone. They found no feet bones. But yet when they draw a picture of Lucy from a very few fragments, they will show almost a human-like ape that walks upright. They didn't find any feet bones. Walks upright. It's almost all imagination.
So what are they basing this theory off of? The fossil?
Well, there's a bunch of issues with it, but they want, if you're a scientist, you want to find something of extravagance and importance that you can write about. So they didn't find any feet bone, but I think it was around 1,000 miles away. These Laetoli prints, which are over 4.6 million years old, that look like human footprints. But they said, oh, the big toe bone is just a hair over, not like a hand, but like a foot. Just, there's a little gap there. So, and humans couldn't have been around 4.6 million years ago. So this had to be a relative of Lucy. This was Lucy walking upright. So we can just show Lucy walking upright. Yeah. In modern day humans, our big toes over because we wear shoes. If you look at people that walk in different areas, native people that don't wear shoes, their big toe naturally moves over to give them more balance. It's shown through multiple people and multiple studies. Even weightlifters are now starting not, do squats and things without the shoes on because you get better balance and better work of your stabilizer muscles. And there's other things too. Her magnus foramen, which is the hole in the skull where your spinal cord goes through. And for humans, is on the bottom. For apes, it's in the back because they're walking up, on all fours and
Yeah.
looking up all the time. Well, Lucy's was in the back. Lucy was 3'10". It was an ape, and these human footprints, most likely just humans, found 4.6 million years ago, or it's supposed to be 4.6 million years ago. Probably just humans at that time, which shows humans are around. But
Right.
those footprints would have had a 6 foot tall Lucy. Lucy was just an ape. They found an ape, and they did what they always do, and they extrapolated that to fit their story.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that's
And
Lucy.
literally with a few fragments, you showed me the picture before this episode, and literally just a handful of fragments of bone. It's not even the full fossil like we talked about when things are fossilized. It is a complete picture of that animal.
It's much more imagination than what they
Yeah.
actually found.
Absolutely. They're making it fit.
Yes, and they're doing a great job with it. Yep.
Yeah.
But going back to the geologic column, you asked about that. A lot of these fossils they found at the very beginning are still around. And once again, so we have horseshoe crabs, there's fossilized, all sorts of things, mosquitoes, crocodiles. One of the fun ones that used to be a poster child for an evolutionary step was a coelacanth. They have a lobed fish, and those lobes were, a little bit different than the normal fins that you'd see on fish. And like, oh, that's them slowly getting arms, until around 20 years ago when they found the coelacanth alive and well. It's just lives at hundreds of feet deep water. So it's not something that fishermen really pulled up very often or saw. But once again, they had to just change their story, and it's no longer a missing link.
So the coelacanth wasn't that ambitious.
It wasn't that ambitious. It did not just get it super excited and start walking on land. No,
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen Fantasia, that's the line in Fantasia.
they got
Yeah,
ambitious and the fish started walking.
It cracks me up. Anyway, back to the science.
Yeah. Another thing is, if evolution is going to be true, Darwinian evolution, there's supposed to be little step-by-step pictures in the fossil record. Do we find one tree of life that everything descends from a common ancestor and just evolves from one animal? No, we do not. We find fully formed animals. There's not issues with these animals. There's not a leg in the wrong place. It's not trial and error. You don't find eyes in weird spots. We find eyes in the front of heads. If something is living on the base of the ocean, we find eyes on top. Like everything is perfectly planned for how it needs to be. You don't have a bunch of trial and error fossils.
Right.
We have no intermediates. And I think Darwin today would actually recant what his theory were, and just based on what we know today, because you don't find a bunch of intermediate fossils. In his book, Origin of Species, they said that you'd have to find a lot of intermediates, and we did not find intermediate fossils. We do not find a tree of life. We find a forest of life.
Right.
Everything takes place after its kind. Why would we give the fossils that we find in the ground some power that we do not see today? Dogs make dog kinds.
Right.
Cat make cat kinds. Horse makes horse kinds. They breed forth after their kind. You can breed, and we do have microevolution. We have adaptation. The DNA is built with the ability to adapt to its environment. We can breed dogs 100,000 times over and get everything from a Chihuahua to a Great Dane.
Right.
But you're never going to get a cat-like creature.
Right.
There are limits on what the DNA can do, and that gets into kind of speciation. It's like, all the dogs different dog species? A lot of them can interbreed. Are cats different cat species? We saw a fun video on a liger the other day. A tiger and a lion in captivity breed. They came from the same animal. And yeah, they probably had a common descendant that was a cat.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. So the word species is actually kind of a misnomer. It doesn't really mean anything. Because, species aren't supposed to be able to interbreed. and they obviously do. There's no distinct line of where a species is. And, DNA has the ability to do some miraculous things and really adapt to their environment beautifully. But we always see fully adapted animals. We
Right.
never see anything partially adapted that doesn't survive or doesn't work well. It just so happens everything we see is created wonderfully and beautifully works in nature how it's supposed to.
Right.
We don't see partially functioning animals that just die and then it's like, oh, had 10 kids that were all these crazy types, but this one worked well, so it survived.
Right.
Darwinian evolution is survival, but not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the luckiest half the time.
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it just poses the question too, like, if Lucy was our missing link, why is that the only thing that they have to go off of? You think we would find other fossils that were very similar and also supporting that theory? Oh, don't.
You find a lot of ape-like
Right.
animals, and you find human-like animals.
Right.
There's no intertwining of them, but they try.
Yeah.
And just, I think the Laetoli footprints around 4 million years ago are a good sign that there are humans there. I
Right.
mean, that alone, they preclude that evidence to say it cannot be a human, when Lucy was around, but yet there are the footprints right there. And, when getting back to the geologic column, it makes sense that you find fish on the bottom, reptiles, mammals, birds, if there was a flood.
Right.
Think about what gets covered up first in a cataclysmic flood. Probably things on the bottom.
Ocean, yeah.
Yeah, probably things on the bottom. But it really does explain how we would have these fossils, because you'd have a cataclysmic event, things get rapid burial of these animals and organisms, and you'd find things in the bottom first. Bigger animals would be able to run uphill. They'd see water's coming and they'd run. You'd expect humans to be on top. We're the smartest.
Right.
You expect birds to be last. Like, how,
Yes,
why? Because
yes.
they're flying.
Right. Exactly.
But just in modern day, we don't see fossils forming because the principles of things just floating or sinking to the bottom, not being eaten, rapid burial, and having water present. Just we see that today. So
Yeah.
I don't think it scientifically it is the best explanation. I think it's a very good explanation at all.
I would agree. And I guess my question is, if they were dating these accurately, how far back would they date, or how young would the Earth actually be?
Well, how are we dating them? If we're using radiometric dating, and we'll talk more about this in a later episode, but it's all based off assumptions, and it's what they want them to show. And they will throw out dates they don't like and keep dates that make sense, because once again, they preclude the Earth had to be really old.
Right.
So, you have modern day, like Mount St. Helens, Hawaiian volcanic eruptions that we know when the dates were, and you can go do potassium argon dating on these lava flows and they'll give you, 250,000 years old, like it was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can date them. But really interesting thing we can do is we have history and we have, artwork and that sort of thing.
Right.
And just so happens, people like Marco Polo traveled to China, and he wrote in his works about seeing different dinosaurs. The Chinese calendar, they have a bunch of animals in their calendar. All of them are real except for the dragon, right?
Right.
Yeah. It just so happens that the word dinosaur didn't come about until the 1860s or so. So before that, everything was called a dragon. The word dinosaur didn't come about. So they were all called dragons, and most likely we would call it dinosaurs now.
Certainly look like dragons.
So, there's a ancient book of all the record keeping that the Chinese had. They had they paid for the smith, they paid for all these different people. Their emperor would have paid. One was a dragon feeder. They had a dragon feeder. How funny is that? But there's a few archaeological finds that we've had that we'll include some pictures on here. But one was a Stegosaurus. Perfectly see the plates on its back. There's nothing else that would look like that. There's a signet ring that they would use to do wax imprints on when sending their letters. Can't remember who the person was, but he has 2 long-necked dinosaurs on it. There's another area that has pictures of long-necked dinosaurs along with other animals written, drawn in copper. And there's a good book called Dire Dragons, which actually shows a lot of these different archaeological finds we have showing that humans had to have seen dinosaurs,
right?
Because you wouldn't make some of these drawings up unless you saw them. Bible actually mentions a dinosaur. Did you know that? A
Where
couple of them. I believe it was in Job, and I can't remember what the other one was. But Job is the oldest, thought to be the oldest book of the Bible. And God is talking about the magnificence of his creatures. And he talks about the behemoth. The behemoth had, so its loins were like iron. So it was huge. It was a magnificent, gigantic animal. And the tail, it had a long neck, and it had a tail that swung about like a cedar tree. And in Israel, the cedar tree was their biggest tree that they built the temple with. It was their longest, biggest, strongest tree. And when you look at modern translations of the Bible, they will say an elephant or giraffe, that have these little tails.
yeah,
It doesn't swing it about like a cedar tree. So if the Bible mentions them, I mean, you're really saying its most magnificent animal was, a long-necked Brachiosaurus, monstrous type animal. And it strikes fear into people who see it. So it was displaying his magnificence. It must have been something quite large, and just find evidence of it today through fossils. So
awesome. And it just goes to prove that, back then when humans were around with dinosaurs and they were documenting them in, their books and in artwork, they obviously were not digging up fossils and doing radiometric dating on them. They didn't have the technology we have now. And we still are just in mass denial of the true age of the earth and the fact that we were around with dinosaurs. It's in the Bible, like you said.
yeah, I mean, it's, they had to have seen them to write about these creatures. They had to have seen them. And I mean, if there was a flood that laid down all these animals, and two of every kind went on Noah's Ark, most likely they took babies. It would have been massive dinosaurs, and reptiles grow through their whole lifespan. They didn't have to take huge ones. They've taken babies. And, every man has that want to be a hunter, and you don't want something. We don't have bears in Kansas City. You don't have lions or mountain lions running around. What do? You can read about different stories of them slaying dragons, slaying dinosaurs. Every man's going to have it in them to go be the hero and go kill them. So we wiped them out. There weren't very many around, but all that's very, very interesting and somewhat hypothetical, but that makes sense why we wouldn't have them around.
So another great example that would prove, that in a very short amount of time that these fossils and rock were laid down is mountain ranges, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's really cool areas in different mountains. You can see it all around the world that we can look at signs to say, hey, were these rock layers laid down slowly over time, one after the other, or was it quick? You can use hydrologic sorting. So you get a bunch of different soil, put it in the jar, put water in it, shake it up, and it will make these layers out for you. But when you look at mountain ranges, you can look at cross sections of mountain ranges, S shapes, going like this. I don't know if you know from looking at foundations, but rocks are brittle. They break. They don't bend, mud bends. So you can look at really cool cross sections of mountains that are going like this. They're not broken. So if they went down slowly over time and then tried to push these mountains slowly, the rocks would break. They break into smaller rocks, and there'd be sand and a bunch of smaller rocks. Rocks don't bend. So you see these. What had to happen is, over the course of a year with the flood, there would be these mud layers that would deposit on top of each other. And, with these from tectonic plates moving and pushing into each other, what we would consider quickly now, hundreds of feet in a year, these mud flows would be bendable, and they would actually be malleable, and they would be able to form these mountain ranges that have these crazy bends in them. You just would not see it if it happens slowly over time. You see these rocks break.
Very cool. Very cool. Just further proof.
Another case and evidence for this rapid deposition is they find trees that are fossilized trees. Some will be diagonal, some will even be upside down through different layers of rock that are supposed to be millions of years old. So these trees are very slow growing, or they were going upside down, going the wrong way for sunlight. It doesn't make sense, They'll find trees going in the wrong directions. But yeah, like you said, there's two theories. Which one does the science make more sense for? And the Bible does say in the last days there will come scoffers, and they will come effectively making fun of and not believing in the flood. It is ironic that people believe and preclude the notion of there ever being a flood with 80% of the Earth's crust as sedimentary rock laid down by water. And these fossil graveyards where thousands of fossils are intertwined. It's just two ways to look at the evidence, but in the last days there come scoffers, and they will not believe in the flood. Just so happens we're here.
Yeah. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Share this with anybody that might be interested as well. And we will see you on the next episode.